Welcome back to Flurry Friday. As promised last week or 2 weeks ago, what we wanted to do today was talk about G Prime and basically the story behind the story. Now, what I mean by that is that we put a lot of backstory and world development into what you see in G Prime. In fact, G Prime is designed to be the first of many stories that go into this ARC universe. And so the long time ago at the very beginning, we had this notion for this game called ARC. And what wound up happening is we sort of subdivided that story into at least 4 chapters that go along about a 40-year period, and they all come together. They all represent a world in which we are trying to tell our version of probably the most famous story it's out there in the whole world, and that's Noah's Ark. We have taken basically all of the core elements, and I should say even all the details that come out through the Genesis 6 narrative, and then we've turned it into this kind of cyberpunk out in space world, which is where G and the subsequent stories will all take place. So there's a bunch of things going on here that may not be obvious, but I think once you sort of know the key, a whole bunch of the details start to make more sense. So needless to say, we've got this element of the rain. And so in the story of G, we have this gigantic, no one knows how big it is, this big fog bank of ice and cloud and dust. It's all rolling into the solar system. No one knows where it's coming from. No one knows if it's good or bad. It's this total mysterious thing. One of the details from Genesis 6 that is often lost is that it says that back then there was no rain. That there wasn't clouds and all this kind of stuff, that actually plants were watered because mist would come up out of the ground and water everything. And so you can imagine that sort of adds to the story, that if some crazy old coot with a hammer is saying, hey, it's going to rain, people don't even know what that is. Like the idea, like, water's going to fall from the sky, shut up. So you can imagine the weirdness of it all. And we wanted to put that forward in this, where no one even knows what this is. And some people think that there's an opportunity for resources. Some people think there's an opportunity to make some money. In fact, that's the main thought of sort of the majority of opinions, like, hey, let's make money off this thing. But on top of that, we also laid in all of this other sort of backstory, and we've pulled a lot from a lot of the conspiracy theory sites, a lot of the kind of like alternate history sites. So you're going to see elements in here that go back to whether or not there are extra planets. So the home planet in this game is called Ta, and Ta, if you don't know the thing, is actually eventually where we see the asteroid belt in our current solar system. So, spoiler, everyone dies in this end of the Noah's Ark story, and that includes the destruction of this planet. And what you see now as the asteroid belt in our world is the remnants of the home world in this game. Now, we don't advertise that. It's kind of a secret here, but for people who want to look into it, we're going to kind of give you some of the buzz here. Other things about this world that you may not immediately know is that we've tied into a whole brand of alternate physics that includes an electric sun, that includes hyperdimensional physics. And so regardless of the reality behind that, we've tied into that here. And we've made it so that we have sails in space. We've got paddle wheels that work in space, and there's a whole realm of extra technology that goes back to phlogiston and the ether. And there's sort of this mix of the pseudoscience from the Victorian era and what if it was real, as well as a lot of the stuff that we're drawing from kind of the fringy stuff of Thomas Van Flanderen and Richard Hoagland. And whatever you think of those guys, we drew a lot of material from that part of the world, and pulled it together into a world that is part cyberpunk, part steampunk, part Sherlock Holmes. And so we put all this together into a world that tries to recreate what's happened around the time of Noah's Ark, but in a totally unrealistic or unfamiliar way. One thing that you're going to see out there is it was known from Genesis that the people of that time had become really just reckless and violent. They were just they didn't have any regard for human life. And we start to show that through this world in what you see is the way in which every person in the world is basically a private contractor, but in a lot of ways they're just sort of slaves for hire. And all of the 10 corporations that you can work for, and you have to pick one, but all of them are really nasty. There are no good guys. At the beginning, they're just an employer. What do you know? But as that starts to play out, you're going to see that all of these guys have an agenda. All of these guys have something that they're hiding. And you're essentially just choosing the devil you're working for. Later on, that will become a choice, and it will be different. But if you look deeper, you're going to start to see that there's a lot of dark side to this, and that there is very little tolerance even for what you might call traditional values. So that becomes a big part of the storyline. You have a father figure who shows up throughout G Prime, and his name is Barker. And so Barker becomes sort of the narrator as well as your friend, and he kind of brings the story forward to you. And Barker will be largely the guy who helps you interpret what's going on in the story. So look for cues in what he's saying as to the meaning behind things, as behind the purpose, and he'll help steer you right, or maybe not. Maybe Barker is just another one of those guys who is like beholden to the man, and you'll have to decide along the way. I want to point out that you will have a third character on the ship, which is your computer. And so E is voiced by Mike Parado, and he does a great sort of electronic voice synthesizer voice. And E is also a character who will, in his way, try to steer you down the path, and you can make decisions on how you want to participate or not. But the story behind G Prime is the first part of a much longer story. So you should expect this to be an introduction. You should expect a lot more information to be rolling out through other means, through other games, through other publications. We've got a whole comic book we want to show. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that we want to be rolling out. And so when you see this, don't expect the whole story, just expect the intro. And I hope that's enough to whet your appetite and get rolling, because it's worth looking into and it's worth discovering. And we're super excited about it because of how much we got to fit into this game that has been back in our world book for over 7 years, and we've just never had a chance to publish it. So that's fired me up, and we'll see you later on. Bye-bye.